where I see that really playing out is wanting to maintain a county that is not just desirable because of our rural heritage. It's desirable because we have the lowest tax rates in the region. We have stellar services for our constituents. We've got great schools. This is, if we don't look at all of those elements that come into play, we're missing out.
At the time of this discussion with Charlie Vaughters, Supervisor for District 4 in Goochland, we haven't yet gotten to September 22nd, which was the first day of early voting. And this is a bellwether year. Everything is, let's say, up for grabs. And so what we want to do on this program, Elections 2023, is take a look at who's on the ballot and who has a chance to actually win or make a strong struggle to do so. And so, Charlie, you have competition in the 4th District. And I'm interested in a couple of things because when you got the position you have, it was filling a vacant seat, and I got really fascinated because it looked like they carefully crafted a job description and did scrutinizing and hiring, and they got a great candidate. And then the reality of politics and people's perceptions and all of that starts to coming into play, and then suddenly, I'm sure you're well more along the road of things now that you're looking at a reelection bid. So I just want to hand you the mic and say, tell me how this works from what you're seeing, your effort in the 4th District, what you've done, what you've learned, what you thought it was, what it turned out to be, the thought versus the reality, the perception.
Absolutely. Thanks, buddy.
So get us started on that. Yes.
I think first and foremost, when you come into a role like I did, was appointed last November, I think you've got to get up the learning curve so you can represent your constituents in the best way possible. And so I admit I have been a political wonk for a number of years and got heavily involved in the Youngkin campaign and serve on the Board of Professional and Occupational Regulation appointed by the governor. So, I enjoyed that. And then I found out about this opportunity to represent the 4th District and threw my hat in the ring. And I'd be lying if I said it doesn't disrupt your daily life significantly. I've got 2 young children. I've got a wife who is MD and an executive with an insurance company. And so I'm very proud of everything they're doing. And I knew it would be a challenge, but it was an exciting challenge to take on. And if nothing else, I think it's incredibly important that we have representation from across our county's spectrum, so to speak, demographics. And so, I like to think, okay, I'm representing the younger professional family man and, trying to bring in whatever banking acumen and financial acumen I can bring in. I know that's helped a lot in working with Supervisor Peterson and getting appointed to the Finance and Audit Committee immediately. So, at the end of the day, we do have a lot of turnover taking place with the Board of Supervisors. And it's not because things are not going well. It's because we've asked a lot of individuals like Susan Lascalette and Ken Peterson and John Lumpkins over the last 10 to 12 years. And they've definitely done an outstanding job to represent our county. And so now it's a matter of, okay, I've got a year under my belt, but even more than that, I've learned how the committees work. I've learned how all our processes work. I'm getting better by the day in the interaction with all the different players in the county. And so but more than anything else, I have a job to do. So I'm putting the job before politics. And in a perfect world, I would have had 2 years remaining on a term. And I use a year to figure things out, and I use a year to campaign in politics. That just, sometimes it's not the way it works. And so you do the best you can with the hands you've been dealt. And, we'll talk about this later, I know, but something like the Centerville plan has been in discussions for a half dozen years, if not a dozen years. And there are things that, some people have been along in the discussions the whole time. I am trying to get up to speed and trying to make sure I'm not judging anything in a vacuum. I'm taking into consideration all the different pieces that will go along with that. I will say one of the most rewarding things I've done in the last 2 months is leading the process to get a deferral in place for the Centerville plan. There's a lot of complexities to that. It doesn't just come with me saying, oh yeah, I think we should defer. We had to figure out how we can do it the right way, how we can take the most important constituent comments, which were, making sure the constituents felt like they had transparency and their voice was being heard, and then implementing that. And the result of that is every constituent in the county, but hopefully, weighed more towards District 4, has the ability till September 15th to submit amendment requests and comments. And then we as a board are going to thoughtfully review all those and figure out the best way to put that into action. And, there's no preconceived notions of how votes are going to go down, but at the end of this process, we'll be able to say, we listened, we were open to taking productive, constructive criticism and feedback, and doing our best to put it into a good, robust plan.
Okay. So let me ask you this, because you're right. We do want to get into some of the details of the Centerville Village Plan, and I want to capture something. You don't have to take a lot of time with it, but it's what interests me. So you're indulging me.
Yeah.
I mean, you were a political wonk, and then you were an appointee, and now you're a candidate running for office, and those are like 3 different phases.
Yes.
Are you the same guy through all 3? Or do you have the same views and opinions and understandings through all 3 of those phases? Or has there been a refinement? So I'm interested in how your viewpoint and understanding has been shaped over time.
Over time, it was a fascination with the politics and the history. I grew up in South Carolina. I had the pleasure of being a Senate page for Strom Thurmond when I was 18 years old. So, got to see the Senate from a totally different perspective and see DC. And then I also worked in Columbia, South Carolina for various internships and seen the state capitol's workings. And then my mother was a city councilwoman in my hometown in South Carolina. So I feel like, just like I love to read about it, just like I love to study it, I feel like I've gotten a really good perspective on all the different levels. And I feel like that's the biggest problem we have in politics these days is people criticize without a real education in what they're discussing. And I think, if nothing else, I love the spirited debate because I love to bring forth all the things that I've learned. And I'll even take it a step further. I mean, one of the things that I'm very passionate about and that I've devoted a considerable amount of my personal time to before I became a supervisor was teaching in the prison system. And so for over 5 years, I've done volunteer teaching for a group called Resilience Education, founded at the Darden School at UVA. But no, that is eye-opening and a way to truly understand, to take yourself out of a bubble and say, okay, I understand the challenges in society and what we're dealing with. And, so to go back to your question is, I think every single day I serve, I want to be drawing from a multitude of life experiences that are varied and that have been very fulfilling to me, and then try and add that to the discussion and add that to decisions that are made, and let more and more people know. I mean, but so that they don't think that I'm acting in a one-sided manner ever.
Right. So about that teaching in prison. So I'm going to, because I've taught classes at times, and when I was in the zone sometimes you could see students' faces go, they would figure it out. There was a synergy there. It was almost like being on stage when I was an actor in local theater. Sometimes there was a synergy of energy with the audience and then the scene, and you couldn't point to it, but if you were there, either side of that stage line, you could feel it.
Yeah.
So when you're teaching prisoners, you've got to see a perspective change. You must have seen resistance of some sort, and then the aha moment. And I guess in a simple formula, you've got constituents that think they understand how things work. They don't want to be dissuaded from that view because then they're going to have to rethink it. But sometimes they do when they realize, well, but it doesn't work that way. And so what you're saying doesn't apply. They don't want to hear that. And that's kind of embarrassing. And of course, I'm sure it's not said that way, but that's been mostly me figuring things out over the years. Oh, is that how that works? Oh, so they can't do that. And so you've probably had similar experiences directly as a supervisor in that way, probably directly connected with the Centerville Village Plan. So let's look at that and maybe some lessons that you've learned, and how do you actually effectively relay the how it works to folks that think they know, but then they need to know more.
I think everything is a teaching moment, and I use this in my banking career all the time. Is a lot of people in the finance world and the banking world talk over people's heads, and I don't think that's the way to do it. I always look at it as, okay, what do they not understand about this product or this process or whatever we're trying to ultimately sell? And then how can I convey the value add being brought to the table? I think it's the exact same thing with the supervisor role. The biggest challenge that I face is I've been drinking from a fire hose for the last 10 months. And that's because I'm passionate about being able to speak to the points with knowledge, a strong background of what's actually taking place. A lot of times, what we can actually affect. That's the biggest misconception I've seen of people with local government, is there's a lack of understanding about what the supervisors can actually affect. So that going back to a previous topic of, sometimes it's beneficial to have a multifaceted or very varied history and education. That's where there have been numerous times I've picked up the phone and called Governor Youngkin's administration, where I've called neighboring counties, where I've called the government agencies and said, okay, I realize this is not where we can make a change at the supervisor level, but how can we address these constituent concerns in that way? And then a term I'll probably use multiple times as we speak, but I do think it's critically important, is stakeholders. Is we don't just, while the constituents come first, always, we have to be considerate of our county as a whole, our staff, all our service providers. It's the sheriff's department, fire rescue, schools, and our businesses. And it's never do I intend to make a decision with just one of those groups, one of those stakeholders, and only one of those in mind. I always challenge myself to make sure, okay, am I looking at it from all the different facets and trying to understand what this impact is going to be? And where I see that really playing out is wanting to maintain a county that is not just desirable because of our rural heritage. It's desirable because we have the lowest tax rates in the region. We have stellar services for our constituents. We've got great schools. This is, if we don't look at all of those elements that come into play, we're missing out and not doing our job as supervisors to the best of our ability, in my opinion. And additionally, we've got to consider, we've got a great county that does more with less all the time. And that is for somebody who used to coach, tennis team and at a school, and somebody who's still wildly competitive. I think it's very important for us to realize if we want to stay offering the best services and top-notch finances and those things, we've got to be prepared for the future. And when we keep taxes low, you got to look at the other end of that spectrum and say, well, that means we got to figure out a way to grow right so that we can grow the revenue. You keep taxes low, you got to grow the revenue. It's not a either or. Well, we've kind of made it an either or because I think we're committed to low tax rates in this county.
So growing the revenue, I mean, bottom line, I get that. I want to ask, let's assume that I don't know anything. And then I heard that the Centerville Village plan is like, it's been worked on for a dozen or more years, and now we're deferring it again. And so I say that as a question example of like, well, clearly I don't understand what's going on. So how would you go like, well, it may seem silly, but let me explain something to you. The deferral is critical because, and we need this input, but we don't have yet. And these things have changed over time.
I think what's changed is we've seen growth around us and not had too much growth, except on the residential side, actually taking place in our county. So what that leads to is a lot of perceptions of what growth looks like being images from Henrico County and other neighboring counties. That's not how I would ever envision growth looking in Goochland County. Doesn't mean we don't, so we don't stand still, we don't stand flat-footed, but we make sure that the development community and business leaders know, okay, we're going to hold you to this higher standard, but we're going to try and give you some guidelines for what those standards are. So you're not guessing and groping around in the dark. That to me is where we can run afoul and really be hurting ourselves for the future. And what I can tell you is Henrico has nowhere else to develop. They've effectively developed every square inch they can. Powhatan is closed for business. Chesterfield County is closed for business. City of Richmond is just too cumbersome to deal with.
So they're going to come try to gobble Goochland up? Is that what
I don't see any way they gobble Goochland up. I see it, and this is what I tell people, when I get an audience with them, is I want to be in a position where we see 20 and 30 proposals, and we have the confidence to say, okay, this one or this two passed the test, versus, okay, we know we need to increase tax revenue. We need to find ways to continue to balance our budgets. And because services aren't going to get any cheaper. That's a reality. So at a minimum, you have to have a baseline of growth. But I think there's ways to do that. And the best way, in my opinion, is to put the conditions by which we're willing to consider growth out there, and then accept those proposals and then have that ongoing dialogue.
I like that about getting the conversation started early. And I think you mentioned something earlier to me before we started on camera, is that you've got some, I think they're community events or outreach events you mentioned.
Yes. In the coming weeks, I'm going to be meeting with a number of the different homeowners associations at the subdivisions across District 4. Additionally, I'm going to be doing a lot of door knocking. And then there's also a number of great larger Republican events in the county and in District 4 in the coming weeks. So, I think there's great opportunities for Republicans in our county to get out and, have one-on-one interaction with the representative, the supervisors and other elected officials. And then also we're going to have in District 4 in the coming weeks, Governor Youngkin and Lieutenant Governor Sears. And if I can't convince you that this is a critical year for the Commonwealth and also the Republican Party, they sure as heck can, because they are committed to it. And I just can't stress enough how important a year this is for the Goochland Republican Party and the Republican Party of Virginia.
And I would submit how important a year it is for you to be reelected and to continue in the efforts that you've been fire hose consuming. And then I'm sure you're not going to constantly be drinking from a fire hose, right? You're going to actually, no. I mean, that's coming to a close, and then the energy with the campaign, and then the things you've learned and the things you understand that have to be accomplished. There's so many things that need to be done right this year.
Nothing can make you more humble than taking on a role like this with a number of contentious issues on the table. You just, I have to be willing to admit when I've still got to learn more about a topic, and
right.
Because it was in District 4, that's the deferral. I mean, I pushed the deferral as much because it was in my district. I need to be the one to have the best understanding of it, in my opinion. And I'm still taking in feedback and information from a lot of different sides. So,
and most of this is you making sure that you're representing your constituents directly,
yes.
as opposed to what may be recalled from something at some point in the past that's taken a snapshot in real time to look at it now.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. Well, Charlie, I want to thank you very much for this interview today. There's probably a lot more we could cover, but the perspective change and the insights and the issues, I appreciate the chat about that.
Yeah, this was great, and I thank you for all you're doing for the Goochland County Republican Committee. And if I could say one thing again, I can't stress how important it's going to be to early vote and to vote, if nothing, on Election Day. And please, one of the biggest challenges with the local elections is understanding who your real Republicans are and who your real conservatives are in representing our county's best interests.
I mean, the Republicanism apparently is a very popular brand, and some claim it, but it's not their property.
It is, yes. So luckily, we are past the dark days of Governor Northam. So we have prosperity to look forward to, and good. We just need to keep the momentum rolling with Republicans in the Commonwealth. And the best part about what the administration is doing right now is stressing how important local politics are, whether it's, of course, education is front and center with the governor, but all the counties are getting attention from Richmond. And I want us to, in Goochland, to be a shining example of how to do things right. AAA bond rating goes a long way there, and balanced budgets with surpluses go a long way, but doesn't mean that we cannot rest on our laurels. We've got to be disciplined and keep working hard for the constituents.
Yeah. I mean, amazing things have been done. Now they have to be retained and maintained. And in some areas, maybe slightly reclaimed for the improvement that we want to see. And I want to include you as part of that. It is a privilege to know you and have you on the committee and to work with you and to look forward to your reelection coming up.
Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it.
2023. Thanks a lot.